If you've been looking for a lens that will give you unique results, this might be the lens that you're looking for. This is the Petzval 55mm f1.7 Mark II. It's a truly unique lens in the way that it gives you control over the bokeh that you get. So we're going to break this down into a few sections. We're going to be talking about a few things. We're going to go over the key specifications, build quality and design, the performance of the lens. We're going to talk about some comparisons and alternatives, and overall we'll give you pros and cons and a final verdict, okay? So first off, we're talking about the key specifications. This is a 55mm f1.7 lens. It goes from f1.7 all the way down to f22. There is no autofocus, it's all manual. It has a 67mm filter thread size, which I'll talk about in a bit later on. It's got a built-in lens hood and a friction cap lens, all for the price of $383 approximately. In terms of build quality, this lens comes in 3 versions. There's the brass, black brass, and this version that I have, which is the aluminum version. This has a declicked aperture, so the aperture ring turns smoothly from f1.7 all the way to f22. No clicks, no stops. So you have 3 rings to control this lens. You have your aperture ring from f1.7 to f22, your focus ring, and then you've got the bokeh control ring, which gives you 7 levels of the swirl. So that goes from level 1 all the way to level 7. Now you also have here what you call a waterhouse stop or an aperture plate drop-in, if that makes any sense. And this allows you to change the shape of the bokeh that you get. We'll talk about that in a bit as well. The friction cap lens is probably my main concern here, probably the only complaint that I have. This thing can easily get knocked off. There's very little resistance. Would have been nice. I've seen TT Artisan do a friction cap lens where there is a bit more felt in the lining of the lens, and that really holds on real nice. This does have some felt around it, but it's very thin. It's easy to knock off. I've knocked it off a couple of times just wearing the camera with this lens around my neck. Now, another thing to point out is there is no focus distance markings or zone focus markings, and this is because of how the lens works. Whenever you adjust the bokeh control, the level of swirl that you want from 1 to 7, this moves the elements within the lens, and from going from 1, which recedes that element in the front there, I'm not sure if there are any other elements in the middle that move, but if you go to 7, all the way to 7, that front portion protrudes, and that changes your plane of focus. So given that your bokeh control changes your plane of focus, you're not gonna have accurate markings. Actually, the only markings that you have here are your minimum focusing distance, minimum focus distance, when you're at bokeh control 1, or BC1 is what it says here, and what it is when you're at BC7. And then it also has your focus to infinity when you're at BC1, or when you go to BC7, what that focus to infinity would be. So obviously if you adjust that, your infinity would be somewhere in between those 2 markings for infinity, and same for your minimum focusing distance. It would be somewhere in between those 2 markings. That's the only other downside I see for this lens. If you're someone that uses the focus markings on manual lenses or zone focusing, this lens doesn't have that. Now, I'm gonna have to get the filter for this here. Another thing that's a bit odd that a few reviewers, I don't think I've seen anybody really talk about this. This lens has a 67mm filter thread size. But what's interesting is, and again, I've tried to look for it through the website of Lomography. I couldn't find anything about this, but basically that filter thread size is your lens hood. So your lens hood, if you look in the inside there, it does have some threading, and that is where your filter will attach. So if that makes any sense. Yeah. So I've never had a lens, I don't own a lot of lenses, but I've never had a lens where the front element is so far away from the actual filter. In terms of usage though, I've had no problems. I don't think I've had any problems in terms of glare or anything like that, given that there is a good amount of space. We're looking at what? About an inch from the front element. That's just an estimation. But no issues with using the a filter on this. A bit odd though. I've never, that's where I struggled really. I couldn't find any specification in terms of the filter thread size and where it would attach. I think I've only seen one other person who reviewed the lens mention it briefly, but yes, if you're going to attach the filter, it's going to attach on the lens, so it's a 67mm filter thread size. Now, we're going to talk about performance, and we're going to start off with image quality, specifically sharpness. This lens is very sharp, specifically down the center, given that it has field curvature. Everything that's away from the center will be out of focus and will have that swirl depending on what level you set it to. But it is very sharp, even wide open at 1.7. And the sharpness does improve as you stop down to f2.8, f4. But due to the uniqueness of this lens, how it's built, and it is, it is a special effect lens, that sharpness is all constrained to the center. If you stop down to something like f22, that blurriness does move further away from the center, but you're not going to get edge-to-edge sharpness on this lens. In terms of contrast and color rendition, actually the contrast on this is amazing. The colors are great. They look a bit warmer, but I think that's more of a plus if you ask me, in my opinion. Chromatic aberration, as far as I can see, is minimal to almost non-existent. If it's there, you really have to pixel peep to see that. The only thing that's really crazy about this lens is the vignette. Vignette is heavy, wide open. It reduces as you stop down, but it never really goes away. So you can correct it in Lightroom in your editing software, but just be aware that it does have heavy vignetting. Now, in terms of the bokeh, this is what makes the lens unique, because the bokeh does give you that swirl around the edges, and you have control over how much that swirl is. I think the bokeh is nice, and the fact that you have these waterhouse stops, which allow you to control the bokeh with these plates. Let me get that for you here. I actually store it in a cloth here because I couldn't find any other way to store these things. But it does come with some of these plates here. Specifically, is it what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You've got 6 other plates. So the default plate that's inside is just a round, wide open plate at f1.7. The plates that it comes with here do have an f-stop indicated. Like if you look at this star plate, it'll say f2.8. The one with the heart is f2. The snowflake is f2.8. I like to say a sunburst plate. This says f3.5. And I've tried using these things, and I assume that you want to set your aperture to the said, to the indicated aperture on the plate for you to get the best effect of that bokeh. One plate you've got here is f6.3. This is like a really small one. I have not used them all. I've tried using the hearts and the star and the sunburst plate, and they're very interesting. The bokeh does come out really nice. Let's put that aside. But that's the number of plates you get with it, and again, that's what makes this lens really unique. The fact that you can control that, not just the level of the swirl, but how that bokeh would come out. And not as much for photo, but they look really interesting if ever you have the opportunity to use it for video. Now, moving on to autofocus and manual focus. Again, there is no autofocus on this lens. It is a full manual lens. Everything is manual. There are no electronic contacts on the back of the lens over here. Right. Oh my gosh. But that's a first for me. The lens hood has come undone. Okay. Okay, so, you know, as we're talking right now, this just happened. Is now rotating, which shouldn't be the case, but I'll figure that out later on. So Lomography, I don't know what's up, but yeah, I don't think it's supposed to do that. The marker in the front, right there, I don't think you want this rotating. Anyway, autofocus, manual focus, no autofocus, full manual. Once you get some practice in, you get the hang of using manual focus, even at wide open at f1.7, but you will be very reliant on focus peaking and zooming in on to make sure you nail focus. So it's great for portraits, not so much for moving subjects. You're going to probably want to stop down to something like f2.8, 3.5, f4 for faster moving subjects. But you do get the hang of it once you get to use the lens a lot. I've been using it for 2 months, and yeah, I still miss shots, but that's how it is when you're using manual. Again, there is no focus distance markings or zone focus markings. So if that's important to you, that's going to be a negative for you. It doesn't have that. In terms of low light performance, it is an f1.7 lens, so this is capable in low light performance. That's really all you can say about that, really, right? For video, one thing that would probably be important for video is this does have focus breathing, but I wouldn't think that would be important to anyone who's looking for this sort of lens, because again, everything is constrained to the center. You've got crazy field curvature and you've got swirly bokeh. So if focus breathing is a concern at this point, I don't think this is a lens for you. Comparisons and alternatives. For comparison, I wanted to only indicate lenses which give off that swirl effect. So there's only a couple that come to mind. At $269 US, you have the TT Artisan 75mm f1.5. It's a longer focal length, and it only comes in an M42 mount, so you're going to need an adapter with that. A lot more affordable though. So if you really are looking for that swirl effect, that is a lens that I would suggest. The difference is you don't have control over that swirl. It'll always have that swirl, right? Another alternative, much cheaper, is the Helios 44-2, which is a 58mm f2, so a lot closer to this. And I say relatively affordable because these lenses would usually cost like $50 US, but that's what people say. But when I do a search locally or elsewhere, I see them costing more like $122, sometimes even higher. So price and quality of the lens may vary depending where you are in the world. But yeah, I'm pretty sure there are other vintage lenses out there that offer the same swirly bokeh effect. Maybe mention them in the comment section below, especially if you have a go-to lens like that. But those are the only two comparisons, alternatives that come to mind. Now, in terms of pros and cons, again, this lens is sharp at the center. It's amazing. It produces very unique images. And the bokeh control, not just through the levels of bokeh control, but through the Waterhouse stops. A Waterhouse stop, that's very unique to this lens and gives you really unique looking images. Sharpness is constrained to the center, so that could be a pro to you, could be a con. And there are no zone focus markings, no focus distance markings. So if you're dependent on that with manual focus lenses, this might not be for you. So who is this best suited for? If you want to create unique looking images, especially for portraits or for videos, this is definitely a great lens. Is it worth the price for $390 US, $383 US? In my opinion, it definitely is. I'm in love with the lens. Again, it sucks though that this just happened right now. The lens hood started moving. I'm concerned about that. That sucks. But the images it produces is amazing. So, final thoughts. I'm obsessed with the lens, given all the pros and cons, especially how you have to keep your subject at the center of the frame. It's not for everyone, but I find it as a welcome challenge. And I am absolutely in love with it. I've been using it for a couple of months and it's almost never left my camera, actually only now just to shoot this video. So yeah, if you have this lens, tell me your thoughts. If you've experienced this thing, the lens hood rotating, let me know if you've found a fix for that. But yeah, I'll see you all in the next video while I figure out how to fix this thing. Cheers.